Ron Nelson, and I'm an artist in Tucson, Arizona. I've been lucky enough to be an artist my entire life. I worked in a lot of mediums, and maybe about 40 years ago I started working with casting paper, using it mostly because it was a free material that I had a lot of. And I came up with a product that was half paper, pulp, and half surplus house paint. And it dries into this really hard material. Here's a few examples. You can use it as a castable. I can also use it as reinforcing other materials. Here's a little saint that I did that's cast paper. Here's a ram that I made that's cast paper and backed up with a few pieces of scrap wood. I just kept working it, trying to find something that I could make multiples of. And I'm hoping that the experiments that I did might work for you, and you might be interested in using this material yourself. Here's one of my a very successful commercial artwork that I sold a lot of, hundreds and hundreds of these. And it's, do I have my name on this one? No. It's made out, it's got scrap lumber in the back and the cast paper in the front. These are cast into a silicone mold. And it's almost completely surplus materials. Just the surface paint is the only thing that I paid for. And I'm hoping you might be inspired by my work enough to want to try to experiment with your own with this material. So for the first 10 years, I mixed the paper by hand and mixed it in a wheelbarrow with a pickaxe. You can see in the background my experimenting with making large earthenware jugs, kind of Mediterranean looking. My wheelbarrow, after 10 years, got so bent that you could see the outlines of the lumber underneath from me constantly pounding on the pulp with the mattocks. And the paper breaks down pretty fast. It only needs about 20 minutes worth of work to get it into a pulp. I got to a point though where I was making so much paper that I had to get a mixer of my own. You mix the paper, it helps to soak the paper overnight. It already becomes half digested with just getting nice and soft. But it breaks down quickly. You can see me working there, working at it. It takes just a few minutes for it to break down. Magazines take a little bit longer. They may actually make a better pulp because they have a lot of clay. And if you get a magazine with really shiny pages, that means they have a lot of clay in it, and the clay helps make it a really nice pulp. But you have to work at it twice as long. It has been such a faithful tool for decades. This paper is a little old, so it takes a little longer. Paper has resin in it from the sap of the tree, and as it gets older, the resin turns into the sap turns into a kind of a resin. That's what makes classic violins sound so good, is that the sap turns into a resin. Oh yeah, there I'm scooping out the paper, out the pulp, using an old planter to drain the pulp in. I tried to use as much recycled materials as I could. Called myself the Sultan of Salvage. And you network with paint contractors. They're trying to get rid of their paint. They're happy to give you their paint. They would give me so much paint that I would need 2 or 3 truckloads just to get rid of the paint that they would have. I would network with people that were trying to get rid of lumber, and they would give me truckloads of lumber. And so it's a nice product that way, because you meet people and they're happy to help you, and because you're an artist, and they like to get rid of the stuff that they don't want anymore. And it works, it's beneficial for everybody, and even our planet, because you're using all recycled materials. I drain all the water off of the paper, and since the paper pulp is going to be mixed with house paint, the pulp has to be just damp. So I have to let this drain overnight. You can see it draining here. I added a few holes. This is for a planter. They sell trees in these. So this pulp now has to dry till it's just damp. Using an old screen door. This will dry overnight till it's just damp enough to mix with the house paint. But you can see it does not take a lot of work to turn newspaper into a paper pulp. And then when you mix the house paint with it, it becomes this amazing plastic material that can pick up fine detail. So here I am using paint from a paint contractor. I also used to get, some cities have trouble getting rid of paint, and they'll have a recycling center that you can just pick up paint. You can see here how the pulp has been dried, it's just moist. I still have my shovel there. I used that shovel for 20 years, and I still have that shovel. It's still functional. I made so much of this product, after a while my shoulder started hurting and I had to buy a mixer. But you can see it's pretty easy. You just need a couple of buckets and you're there. And it's an amazing product. I mean, it's half plastic, and so when it dries just rock hard. At this phase, you can do things with it. You know, you can, it's because it's so pliable and plastic. So one of the ways I was able to survive was by making many multiples. Some artists can create some great work of art and get a good price for it, but my path was to make multiples using surplus materials that didn't cost anything, and that helped lower the price of my product, made it more reasonable price for people to want to buy them. And this material just worked out great for me. I started, at first I was casting onto plastic sheets and making large castings and painting them. And eventually I started casting into silicone molds. And the silicone molds, there's many silicone products you can buy, and they're out there, and you can also find on YouTube how to make a silicone mold. But they look like this. This is you make a positive out of clay. I carve clay first, and then I cast a silicone mold, and then I'll cast my paper pulp house paint mixture onto these silicone molds and let them dry. Weight them down with the brick so that they don't warp. And my product is, I make 2-ply, and you get amazing detail with this castable. I'm using this as an example. You see every little tile on this thing, and you can add and subtract too. I'll show you an example of adding and subtracting. Here I am casting the paper onto a silicone mold. You can see I'm working the pulp into every little nook and cranny, pushing it in there, forcing it in to make sure there's no air bubbles. The results of the casting depend on the weather. If it's moist outside in the wintertime, it casts much better than it does in the summer when it's really hot. Sometimes if you have imperfections, I just get a little wood putty and fill in all the little holes and where there might be a little defect. So they don't come out perfect all the time, but they often turn out good enough to work with. These are my drying racks that I made. I had 6 of them at one time because my production was just so high. I was making 30 objects a week. I was making my artwork 2-ply, and after the casting was dry enough, but still moist, I would add brick so that it would not warp when it dried. But it doesn't matter if it does warp, because you could just wet it down and put some weight on it and it'll go right back to shape. You can see my mixer in the background. I bought that mixer after about 10 years because I had so much volume that I just couldn't do it by hand anymore. Here's a piece that's dried completely, and I'm taking the bricks off. It's at this point now where you can add and subtract elements of the casting. You can, sometimes I'll add a butterfly from a separate mold, or a bumblebee, or you can add borders to it. You can cut it up, do whatever you want with it. So now that the first ply of the casting is dried, then I get ready for the second one. Yeah, I took a piece of wood off there just to protect the silicone from the sun, the Arizona sun. It just makes it nice. The silicone molding material likes this paper pulp. I have some molds that are 30 years old. You can use the same silicone mold to cast concrete, fiberglass, hydrocal, wax. A lot of those, like concrete, they take something out of the mold when you use them, but the paper, it's wet with the paint. The silicone mold really likes it, and they last forever. I've made hundreds of castings from some of these molds. And here I am now putting the second ply. So it's kind of like making plywood. And I've made some of these 6-7 feet across for the larger homes up in the foothills here that have big wall space. You can cast as large as you want. I always thought how nice it'd be to have a cement truck and just fill it with paper pulp and make a gigantic casting. You know, you could make it 20 feet across if you wanted to. So I'm lucky enough to have a truck, and here's just a load of lumber that I got from I think from a recycler on this one. And the lumber, as I mentioned before, I would get from remodelers. There was a door and sash place up on the corner that I got a lot of lumber from. Places that make cabinetry get rid of a lot of lumber, and you could just find them. You could just, you know, if you had to, I guess, get furring strips at like a Home Depot or someplace like that. And then I also have a table saw, so I'm able to cut the lumber into strips. And I made a real effort to have my product as much out of recycled material as I could. Towards the end, all I was paying for was just the eye screws and the piece of wire and the paint for the surface. It's funny, you make these castings and all you really see is the painted surface, but 90% of the work was just went into casting it and reinforcing it. And the painting was just at the very end, and that took the least amount of time, but that's what you see the most of. So it took years to develop a backing for my castings. I started pretty minimally, and they still worked, but eventually I got it so there was a support about every 4 inches. And there's in the background you can see those urns that I tried to make, and there's a big face that I made where it was mostly wood, but the beard, the Nebuchadnezzar beard, was made out of cast paper, and the lips were made out of old hose. I like to use a foaming glue like a Gorilla Glue because it would bubble up and fill in all the uneven surface there. I would add a border of paper. And just to make the paper pulp stick better to the wood, I would just paint it with a little surplus house paint. It doesn't really matter what color it is or anything. It's just the pulp would stick better to the fresh paint. And it makes a nice border too. I don't like signing the surface of my paintings. It was nice I would just make a casting of the title of the piece and my name on the side. And also on the back for provenance, I would make some little titles and references that I would glue onto the back. One time I was teaching at Santa Clara, and they had a really nice collection of Picasso ceramics. And you turn the back over, and all this provenance that France, was it France? Yeah, France put on there just to prove that who made it and everything. It had his thumbprint. And I thought that was so cool that he went through all that effort to do that. And so I started doing it. So here's an example of adding and subtracting. You can hardly tell that this is all one piece of paper, but the side I cast separately. I made a mold for the sides, and then this is a separate casting, and I put it all together flat and then added a second layer of paper on top. I turn it around. You can see it's all made of scrap lumber. Like I said before, I got the wood from sash and door places or cabinet shops, or another one that was good was remodelers. Yeah, remodelers were a good source of lumber because they would. One time somebody had a den out of knotty pine and filled a dumpster, and that was enough lumber to last me for 4 months, just on that one. And then the only thing I really paid for was just the glue to hold it all together. And this piece is probably 20 years old, and it looks brand new. I mean, it really holds up because of all the house paint that's in it. Here's another cut and paste that I made using 2 different molds. I used the yucca cactus twice on each side of the figure, and then this figure I did during 9/11. I spent 2 months just carving her kimono, and it's a much larger casting. It goes all the way down to here. Okay, this is one part of my product where I have to spend a day just hatching, trimming the edge of the casting so it looks nice and even. And I would have 1 day a week that I would just attack the casting and clean up the edges. Yeah, then I got it nice and smooth. There's a little bit of touch up here and there. Once I use a horse rasp. That's a rasp for cleaning a horse's hoof, and it worked well for me. They'd last about 4 or 5 months before they would go dull. So after the casting has been made and I've reinforced it and I've put the sides on it, I take care of all the little imperfections. You might see a little spot here or there where I've used a little bit of wood putty to fill in any little holes and stuff. These petroglyphs I made the most of, and what's nice about them, there's pretty much 2 colors, and there's a high surface and a low surface. The low surface I paint black, and then using a sponge brush I'll paint white on the top, so it's an easy relief to paint. Oh, I'd have to make 30 of these a week. You know, that's the nice thing about making multiples is that and molds is that you can make a lot of product. It also helps being in Tucson because your stuff dries really fast. So here I am painting. I sold a lot of prickly pears and florals. Again, high and low. The low areas all the lines I would start with a dark purple. You could see that I filled any imperfections with wood putty and sanded them down. And you sometimes have a few imperfections in this. It helps to put at least 50% surplus house paint in your pulp. So this is not going to be a purple painting. You will not see hardly any purple at all. It's just going to be, the lines are going to be purple on this when it gets done. So here I'm using a sponge brush, and it's flat, so it only paints the surface, and it doesn't. It leaves the little purple line, and that's all I was going for when I painted purple, was just to leave that nice little purple line there. I like the purple line worked well for me. The rest of the painting will all be done with a sponge brush and occasionally a little light wash. There I'm getting all the little painting in the little imperfections. Those imperfections are really nice to put a wash on, because the wash colors will all run into those little imperfections and give it a nice veneer. So this image is just from a photograph that I took. I didn't draw it. I took a photograph and then I made a graph of it. And you can learn how to make graph paintings on somebody else's instructional YouTube maybe, but it's easy enough to do. It's nice if you use your own photographs, but you can take imagery that you like, a piece of this, a part of that, maybe you don't like the telephone pole, you can take that out. And a lot of my artwork is actually made from photographs that I take of plants and flowers in my neighborhood as I'm riding on my bicycle to and from work. And I'll take a photograph of it, and if I like it, then I'll use it for a casting. So the painting progresses. Usually I'll do cactus paintings all at the same time, because I have all my paints out. And you can see there in the background I use little test colors from that you can get at like a Home Depot or a Lowe's like that, and they're very inexpensive, and you can get any color you want, and they last a good long time. And they're house paint, and they're incredibly durable, and I like the liquidness of them too. When using a sponge brush, it covers really easily, instead of using paint out of a tube that you have to dilute. These are just ready to go. And you can see there's almost no purple left, just a little bit of purple in the cracks, and that one is pretty much done. I'll make 10 of those in one sitting. Oh, completely 100% recycled material. You can't even tell it's made out of recycled material. You don't know what it's made out of, actually. A lot of times I'm just looking at forms and seeing if I could use some things that I just see around. You can find them in nature, rocks. I was visiting a neighbor that was a metal sculptor, and he had a metal disc from farming equipment, and I looked at it and thought, gee, that could be used to make a platter. And I asked if I could borrow it, and he said, sure, no problem. So I started casting platters from this disc, and I would do one pass with just paper, and then a second pass to put the edges on, to bury a wire to hang it, and I like that form. Here, I'll pull this one up, and you can see this one I carved out with a X-Acto knife, but I also made ones I could make forms from. So a lot of them were just one-offs. I would make just one casting. This is another one that I made with an X-Acto knife. Some I did from a casting that did really well. Some I made one of, some I made hundreds of. He wanted his disc back, so I just used his disc to make a mold. This one is just made out of hydrocal and fiberglass. It was a pretty simple mold to make. But you don't need to make a mold like this. You can use sand, you can use dirt, you can use styrofoam, you can use cardboard, whatever you can think of. But the paper pulp mixture is really sticky. It sticks to everything, so you have to have a release. If you're doing sand, you could just cast on the sand, and then when your casting dries, you can brush the sand off. But if you're using like styrofoam or another natural form that you might like, I would just cover it with a sheet of plastic and then use a release like old bottles of shampoo, hair conditioner, body wash, hand lotion, and after the piece is dried, you can just wash that off. If you're using sand, you'd brush the sand off and just put a new coating of paper down. But they all seem to work. Here's another technique I used with my pulp, was I would make a form out of cardboard and then cast the pulp onto the cardboard in several layers and then paint them. I called these Krells. From the Fantastic Four, there was Super Krell that could change into any shape. And so I would make multiple, sometimes I would make 2 or 3 of the same shape and just paint in different colors just to see what colors seem to work best. But here's another option. Tubes from mailing tubes, and then just bits of cardboard that were just glued together and then covered with my pulp. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope that it gave you some ideas. Every artist has his own path. This was mine. I'm hoping that it can work for you. I'm hoping that you can get some ideas of what I've been doing and take this idea and run with it. My thing is imagery. You could have form. It's all up to you. I had a lot of fun doing it. I met a lot of people along the way. And good luck. And thank you for watching.